The wild Bactrian camel is called havtgai in Mongolian. It is closely related to the domesticated Bactrian camel. They share characteristics and locales. They are both large, even-toed ungulates native to the steppes of Central Asia, with double hump. Experts describe it as a separate species from the domesticated Bactrian camel due to its distinct genetic makeup. It is restricted in the wild to remote regions of the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts of Mongolia and Xinjiang. A few wild Bactrians still roam the Mangistau province of southwest Kazakhstan and the Kashmir Valley in India. The habitat, arid plains and hills where water sources are scarce, have very little vegetation, so shrubs are the main food source. Differences between Camelus ferus and Camelus bactrianus. It is still debated whether the wild Bactrian camel is a separate species or a subspecies. Until recently, wild Bactrian camels were considered to have descended from domesticated Bactrian camels which escaped captivity or were returned to the wild. However, a 1.9% difference in mitochondrial DNA suggests a divergence date of 0.7 million years, long before the start of domestication. The wild Bactrian camel has been described as relatively small, lithe, and slender leg, with very narrow feet on a body that looks laterally compressed. Quote, zoological opinion nowadays tends to favor the idea that C. Bactrianus and Dromedarius are descendants of two different subspecies of C. ferus, and there is no evidence to suggest that the original range of C. ferus included those parts of Central Asia and Iran where some of the earliest Bactrian remains have been found. The wool of C. ferus is shorter and sparser than that of domestic animals, and its color is always sandy. And most notably, C. ferus has low, pointed, cone-shaped humps, usually about half the size of those of the domestic camel in fair condition. Like its close relative, the domesticated Bactrian camel, it is one of the few mammals able to eat snow to provide itself with liquids in the winter. It can also survive on water even saltier than seawater, which no other large mammal in the world, including the domestic Bactrian camel, can tolerate. The wild Bactrian camel differs from the domestic Bactrian in a number of ways: smaller, more conical humps, flatter skull, a different shape of foot, but the outstanding difference is genetic. Habitat. The habitat is in arid plains and hills where water sources are scarce. Very little vegetation, and shrubs are the food source. Wild camels travel over long distances, seeking water in places close to mountains where springs are found, and hill slopes covered in snow could provide some moisture in winter. Size of the herds varies from 100 camels close hills, but generally of 2 to 15 members in group. This is reported to be due to arid environment and heavy poaching, as against about 2.5 million domestic Bactrian camels reported in Central Asia. The statistics for the wild Bactrian are limited to 3 pockets in Mongolia and China, about 650 in the Gobi Desert in northwest China, and 450 in the Mongolian Desert. In ancient times, wild Bactrian camels were seen from the Great Bend of the Yellow River extending west to the southern Mongolia deserts and further northwest China and central Kazakhstan. In the 1800s, due to hunting for its meat and hide, its presence was noted in remote areas of the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts in Mongolia and China. In the 1920s, only remnant populations were recorded in Mongolia and China. Description. The habitats of the Bactrian camel have widely varying temperatures. The summer temperature ranges from 40 to 50 degrees C in winter temperature, a low of -30°C. The long, narrow slit-like nostrils and thick eyelashes, and the ears with hairs provide protection against desert sandstorms. They have tough, undivided soles with two large toes that spread wide apart, and a horny layer which enables them to walk on rough and hot, stony or sandy terrain. The body hair, thick and shaggy, changes color to light brown or beige during winter. The legend that camels storing water in the stomachs is a misconception. Though they have capacity to conserve water, they cannot survive without water for long periods. They are fully migratory and widely scattered, and move in groups of 6 to 20, depending on the food available, with a single adult male in the lead, and assemble near water points where larger groups can also be seen. The population density is reported to be as low as 5 per 100 square kilometers. The lifespan is about 40 years, and they breed during winter with an overlap into the rainy season. Females produce offspring starting at age 5 and thereafter in a cycle of 2 years. Status: the wild Bactrian camel is more critically endangered than the giant panda. John Hare in his 2009 book estimated that there were only about 900 of them left in the world. The London Zoological Society recognizes it as the 8th most endangered large mammal in the world, and it is on the critically endangered list. Observations made during 5 field expeditions starting in 1993 by John Hare and the United Kingdom-based Wild Camel Protection Foundation suggest that the surviving populations may be facing an 80% decline within the next 3 generations. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, its status was critical in the 1960s and gradually declined to critically endangered status in 2000 to 2004. Research carried out by the WCPF in association with John Hare from 1993 onwards indicated that this species of camel could suffer an 80% reduction in numbers in the next 30 years. Threats: wild Bactrians face many threats. The main threat is hunting. In the Gobi Reserve area, 25 to 30 camels are reported to be poached for domestic use every year, and about 20 in the Ungulates Nature Sanctuary. Other threats include landmines laid in the saltwater springs, scarcity of access to water, attack by wolves, migration into domestic areas in search of grazing land, hybridization with domestic Bactrians resulting in infertile individuals which will attempt to reproduce for some 30 to 50 years unsuccessfully, toxic effluent releases from illegal mining, redesignation of wildlife areas as industrial zones, and sharing grazing areas with domestic animals. Conservation. Several actions have been initiated by the governments of China and Mongolia to conserve this species of mammal, such as the Ecosystem-Based Management Program. 2 programs instituted in this respect are based in the Great Gobi Reserve in Mongolia, set up in 1982, and the Arjan Shanl Nature Reserve on the border of Kumta Sand Dunes in the Tibetan Mountains Reserve, established in China in 2000. The Wild Camel Protection Foundation, the only such charity of its kind, has as its main goal conservation of the wild Bactrian in its natural desert environment to ensure that they do not get listed in the extinct category of IUCN. The actions taken by the various organizations, motivated and supported by IUCN and WCPF, are establishment of more nature reserves for the conservation and breeding them in captivity, 15 animals in captivity, to prevent extinction. The captive breeding initiated by WCPF in 2003 is the Zakinus Sanctuary in Mongolia, where the initial program of breeding lost non-hybridized herds of Bactrian camels has proved a success with the birth of several calves. The wild Bactrian camel is also being considered for introduction at Pleistocene Park in northern Siberia as a proxy for extinct Pleistocene camel species. If this proves feasible, it would increase the geographic range considerably, adding a safety margin to the survival